Good morning, YouTube family. It's Rev Wendy here with the Community of Compassion coming to you just an hour later this week. I had mentioned last week that I would be guest preaching at my regular time of 11 o'clock. So I just got finished guest preaching on a Zoom call with the Church of the Covenant, which is a local Presbyterian church here in the Washington, D.C. area. And now I get to be with you and talk to you all a little bit about finding peace in the midst of the storm. As always, I appreciate when you all join me and you bring such a supportive presence and you bring your energy and you comment, you like, you share, you subscribe. You come through during the week just to leave a little message of encouragement, and I appreciate each and every one of those. Thank you so much. Continue to do that as we continue to build out and grow this channel. I hope that you will continue to stay with me. And so today, I just wanted to share briefly around the topic of finding peace in the midst of the storm. And of course, the storm that I'm talking about is the one that is continuing to swirl all around us, particularly in the backdrop of the coronavirus pandemic. You know, it can be very difficult sometimes when things are collapsing all around you and when the storm is raging around you to even think about peace, let alone find it. And so today I want to encourage us in the words that say, "This too shall pass." But I want to not do it in a way that in any way diminishes what a lot of people are facing and are about to face. You know, there are still numerous protests going on around the world, uprisings around, Black Lives Matter and issues concerning equality and inequality and police brutality, and those things are still happening, particularly in pockets of the country. And so that's kind of a little storm that's still brewing. But as of this week, there's a storm on the horizon. I posted about it earlier this week in social media that's coming, that really we are not going to fully be able to assess until we're in the midst of it. And that is the economic collapse that is continuing and the eviction moratoriums that are being lifted, as well as the unemployment insurance that is expiring. Now, those three are working sort of as a perfect storm right now that has the potential to consume so many of our fellow Americans, and maybe even you or someone you know, that it behooves of us to try to find a way to help support each other during this particular storm as it develops. You know, July 31st served as the expiration date for the unemployment insurance, the additional monies that were being provided to folks weekly as a result and in response to the millions of jobs that have been lost as a result of the pandemic. So you did have people that were still somewhat staying afloat, if you will, because they had those benefits. There were also moratoriums extended in some cities regarding rent. Most of us know that most rents are due the first of the month. And so as we got deeper into the coronavirus impact, you had some landlords and companies being willing to extend grace and extend moratoriums so that people who fall behind on their rent or their mortgage payments would not face the fear of eviction. Well, they have determined that those are going to lapse as well. Then, of course, there are still businesses that have not reopened and more businesses that are closing. And those businesses don't represent just the economy. It represents jobs, people's livelihoods. I read this week that there are 800 Dunkin' Donuts that are scheduled to close permanently by the end of this year. 800. Now, you may not be a big Dunkin' Donuts person, and you may be saying, well, that's, what does that mean? That may not mean much to you, but there are small communities around this country where family members are employed by Dunkin' Donuts. That particular retail fast food outlet is their livelihood. It's how they're sustaining themselves and their families. And when we say that store is going to close permanently, in many places, there's not other options available for those folks to just jump right over into another position. And so that's the economic collapse. That's the expiring of the moratorium on rent and evictions, and then you couple that with the unemployment insurance expiring. It's not good. It's not a good mix. It is a storm of economic and historic and almost biblical proportions to me, that requires us to step up and to pay attention and to be ready to help people who might feel like the boat is about to turn over. It reminds me of a scriptural story, of course, in Matthew 8:23, verses 23 through 27, where Jesus and his disciples were on a boat. They had finished ministering to a group of people and feeding the 5,000, and Jesus looked at them and said, "Hey, let's go to the other side. Let's get to the other side, to another city." They got a boat. They got in there, and hi, Jen. They got in the boat and they proceeded to go to the other side. So the disciples are up, manning the boat. Jesus goes downstairs to go to sleep, and they come up against a tremendous storm. I mean, a storm that was shaking the boat. It was flipping it. The waves were crashing over it. They're barely hanging on, some of them by one hand, and they're wondering, where is Jesus? Oh my gosh, we're so afraid. We're about to die. We're about to drown, I think is what they said in the word. So eventually, Jesus does emerge from the hull of the boat, and he comes up and he was like, "Why are you so afraid? What is the problem? What is going on? Where is your faith? I said we're going to the other side and we are going to get there." And in that moment, Jesus spoke to the wind. He spoke to the waves. "Peace, be still." Things calmed. The boat stabilized itself, and they were able to get to the other side. Now, of course, there's a spiritual message in that, but I'm not necessarily going for that today. I want to take a look at the metaphor here and what this means regarding our folks who right now feel like they're in a boat that is being whipped from side to side, that they feel is about to turn over on their heads, and their leadership or government is asleep at the wheel in the bottom of the boat. What kind of fear and anxiety is coming over folks in this moment when they're not sure within the next 48 hours where they might be able to lay their heads, if they're going to have an income, if they're going to have a job? I've been in that space. I know what it's like to be worried, to be concerned about being able to pay your bills and pay your responsibilities. These are not lazy people. These are not people who are not willing to work. These are our fellow Americans who, through no cause of their own, find themselves worried about surviving till the next opportunity for them to take care of their responsibilities. This is a storm that is about to happen, and it doesn't appear that our leaders are stepping up in a way that they could, and in my opinion, should be, to help our fellow citizens. It's important to follow current events, and it's important to pay attention to what's happening around us, whether it's us or people in our circle of influence, in our families, in our communities, because millions of our fellow Americans are about to be impacted even more by what's going on in our nation. The storm is about to turn over their boat. So then what can we do? When Jesus emerged from the hull of the boat and he told them, to be still and he would take care of it, that sometimes, and that message can sort of diminish for people what they're truly feeling. And so for me, as a person of faith, I feel like we are called to be that anchor and to be that peace for people who can't find it in the midst of what's going on for themselves. Those of us who have been fortunate enough to maybe not be as impacted by what's happening around us as others, our role then is to stand up and say to them, I will hold you, I will help you, I will support you, I will stand in the gap for you until you can stand again on your own 2 feet. Finding peace in the midst of any storm can be very difficult, and it can sound unrealistic, and even to some, it can sound condescending from the standpoint of, how can you be talking about peace when everything around me is falling apart? So we must acknowledge that there will be some people who may not be open to hearing about steps to peace because they don't know what their next step is going to be. But we do want to try to reassure people and ourselves that God is with us, even in the midst of storms, and that when things are falling apart all around us, there can be pockets and areas where we see God's hand, we see God's love, and we hear God's voice. We can encourage people to look for that. Mr. Rogers said, look for the helpers. Are you a helper? Are we a helper? Can we be those helpers that people look to when they're going through this storm that's coming? We can point people to spiritual practices if they do that. Prayer, meditation, yoga, or whatever activities that bring them a sense of peace. We can open up our hearts. We can open up our homes. We can open up our wallets if we're in a position to do that, to let people know that even in the midst of the storm, I'm not going to let you drown. You are not alone. Offering people ourselves, a shoulder to cry on, a listening ear, or even ministry of presence can help to soothe someone who's hurting or suffering. Ministry of presence is just that. It's you going to sit with someone. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to offer anything. Just your presence, your physical presence, can be completely healing to someone and calming to someone who internally is feeling very confused and very anxious. My main message today is that I just want us to be aware. I have a tendency probably to pay more attention to current events than I should because they do get me worked up. But my passion is social justice. My passion is making sure that the least of these are taken care of. My spirit is grieved when I see our fellow human beings struggling, and especially in a world where I feel like we have the means to help people not have to struggle so hard. So I just want to encourage each and every one of you all today that as this pending storm comes, I do believe deeply, as Jesus told the disciples, we will get to the other side. I do believe that this too shall pass. I do believe that storms come to pass. The issue is that I have not seen many storms of this magnitude come through and pass without leaving a lot of damage. So I want us today to think about how can we be there for people? How can we provide peace in the midst of the storm for those who can't even see peace anywhere in their circumstances? I believe if we reach inside our hearts and we reach inside our soul and spirit, we can prepare ourselves to be peace bringers, to be peacemakers, and to be peace givers. We can be examples to others and do what we've been called to do. If there's someone around you that you know is hurting, just extend a hand, extend some help. And some people, when they're in this situation, and again, I can speak to this from personal experience, you get to a place sometimes where you're sort of ashamed to ask for help. You feel like you don't want to be a burden to other people. You feel like, or maybe you just don't want, you feel guilty that maybe you shouldn't be in this situation and that somehow maybe something you did do contributed to it. I am asking and praying that you set aside that self-criticism or that self-judgment. Much of what's happening today has been out of all of our control. None of us could have predicted in any way, shape, or form that we would be experiencing this. And here we are in August already. It seems like time is flying and standing still at the same time. This year started off in January. It started off even kind of rough with lots of losses and people dying and things happening. And it's just kind of gone unfortunately in a downward spiral from there. Now there have been highlights, don't get me wrong, and there people have still been grasping on to things that are positive and trying to hold on to them. But I do believe when history looks back on 2020, it's going to be much more about the storm than it's going to be about the sunrise. And so my prayer is still that we get better as these days of 2020 wind down. But as we all know, there's still a lot of stuff on the horizon, particularly the election that's coming up. And so who knows, that's going to be in less than 100 days. So there's, of course, going to be a lot of things happening in between that time. And then certainly after the election, regardless of the outcome. So we really need to prepare ourselves. We really need to brace ourselves because, again, there are storms on the horizon. And for some, they are feeling like they may not be able to push and make it through. There is peace available during the storm. And in the midst of it, it's peace that you might have to seek. But let us make sure on our end that for those who are seeking peace, that in us, they can find it. I thank you always for tuning in and just being willing to consider how can you be a support to someone else. That's what I love about this community. That's what I love about the folks that I've met along the way, whether it's, in life, in my church experiences, certainly, as a part of the Yang Gang, which is another part of my life. I have just met some of the most wonderful and caring and loving and giving people. And I know that there's more of us in this world than there are that want to not demonstrate love. I said the other day in a post that I have more faith in humanity to overcome evil than I do in evil to overcome humanity, because we're bigger than that. So let us continue to be bigger. Let us continue to show love, to push back, to support, and to be there for one another. Gracious God, we thank you for this time today. We thank you that there is the possibility of finding peace in the midst of a storm, even when the storm is raging and appearing to be overwhelming. God, help us to find the people, lead us to those who need help, who need support, who need our peace, who need our grace, who need our love, and equip us and strengthen us to be your eyes, your ears, your feet, and your heart in a world that is suffering, so that when we get to the other side, we can truly say that even though it was difficult, this too did pass. We thank you and we praise you. Amen. As always, I thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back to our regular time next week of 11 o'clock. I look forward to speaking to you at that time. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, and I will be in touch with you next week. Thanks. Have a good one. Bye-bye.